Hello, I'm Mark Tucker.
And I'm Alan Furstenberg. Welcome to Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs. Hey, Alan.
Hey, Mark. What you been up to?
Well, continuation of our long theme, it seems like, on content management systems. So the last episode, we talked a lot about this thought experiment code playground I was doing with Jovo, and thinking about how you could create a content management system for basically for the responses, and how you could maybe push that into its own system so designers would be able to come up with all the content, use conditionals for each of the different sections. And some of those things would just be picked up automatically by whatever is in the context or the environment, which is based up of all the different things, the request that comes in, the different things that Jovo layers on top of as far as the input and the output, and then any of the data storage mechanisms that Jovo has. But the idea is that you could define what these templates were in some sort of a UI or GUI, right?
Right, and you know, this gives the advantage that you would have developers would be able to add code and such into the Jovo component, but that lots of stuff could be offloaded outside of this code block,
right?
So you didn't need developers all the time.
Yeah, and so in the end,
and one of the things I commented at the time was, this is looking good, but you're going to need a UI to go build those templates.
Yeah, so the idea is that in the end, the output of this UI would be a JSON file that's hosted in the database, hosted in S3, maybe like generated and stored in the code as a file. But in the end, if the idea being is if you can get this data in a JSON file, then you could put it someplace where it was accessible and you could use and customize outside of the code. So that's kind of the idea. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I'm going to introduce you to a headless content management system called Sanity.io.
Okay, we've talked about Sanity a little bit before, I think in either part 1 or part 2 of our CMS.
Yeah, we've mentioned it. So Sanity.io is a headless content management system, which means that you can use APIs to add or change data, or also query data or content to put into your system, whatever your system is. It could be a mobile app, it could be a website, it could be a voice app, right? So WordPress is a content management system, but its UI is married to the content. It's extensible and things, and it does a lot of things, but there is a UI that's dedicated to WordPress. Whereas with a headless CMS, you would have to create your own UI to access. The whole idea is that it's API first. It's a content management system that was built on with an API first, and then any UI would be built querying that API. And the API
when we say any UI would be querying that API, we mean a UI for the user facing end.
Yes. So the user, the content creator, for creating blog posts and other things, right?
Also for content creators. So basically, yes, this is a data store, and you'll have apps that both are part of the content creation and other apps that are part of the content usage, perhaps.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Or you can plug it into some sort of a pipeline where you do different things, and this pipeline would push something into some system, and that might call an API, which would then push it into Sanity's data store. So you can get a free account on Sanity, so there is no risk in trying it out, and they're pretty flexible. You've got some generous usage here. You get 2 different data sets, which are 2 different, in essence, databases. So I've got one that's their built-in blog sample, and then I've got another one that's kind of my playground for a voice CMS, kind of playing around with the idea here. But you get so many API calls and bandwidth and different things built in, and then you would pay additional things. But as long as you're within this amount, then it's free.
Now,
So,
looking at this, and I have not looked at Sanity IO before, so they refer to documents and assets here. What is a document and what is an asset in this context, and versus a data set, perhaps, or maybe
so
not,
a data
perhaps, I don't
set,
know.
a data set contains multiple documents, and documents can be of different types. So like your typical, like a WordPress would have pages and posts, right? So you could create a document that was of type blog post, and you could create a document that was of type page, and you could have multiple instances of those documents. So like 5 blog posts and 5 pages would be 10 documents that would then be stored in a data set.
Okay.
Now, assets are really mostly image files.
Yeah, graphics and audio.
Yeah.
So the queries that you're doing are against the documents. That's what's being returned, basically. Yeah.
So what I'm going to introduce today is just like getting started with this. And it's not really, it's going to be about how do you define the structure of documents and edit those, and kind of what the UI is to do that. It's not so much about consuming, but just remember that because you can put this in there and it's an API first CMS, then you can pull this stuff out. And usually the way to query this stuff out is through GraphQL. Now there's kind of a layer that they put on it, some sort of a query language they call Grok. That's kind of a flavor of GraphQL. But the idea is that you can say, give me all the documents that match this filter, or give me the document that matches this filter, but only return these fields. And if there's a nested or referenced field, go ahead and grab that as well. So you could pull back just the information that you need for a certain thing. So to get started, what you're going to do is you're going to install the Sanity CLI. What that's going to do is create a CLI tool where you can then say Sanity init, and what it's going to do is ask you a couple of questions. It's going to then bring up a window, like a web page where you can choose like what Google account, or there's lots of different options, how you're going to log in. And so it's going to use that information, and behind the scenes, it's going to create an account for you. It's going to create a data set. And you can choose a template, like you can say, hey, I want to use the blog template, and then it will create the different documents in that system to do that. So like on the server side of things, you can see I've created a blog and I've created a voice CMS. And if I look into this blog, this is more of an admin. It's saying, oh, you've got, this is one of 2 data sets. You've got 3 documents. It's all about usage, but you can say who are the members of this. You can have unlimited admin access. You can also have non-admin users. So there's just different, this is all settings about about this project. And I'm not too worried that you get to see the project ID, because this is a dummy project. But what happens when you do the Sanity init, then it's going to create a project. And actually, if I remember correctly, it's going to create a React project that has a lot of configuration. So behind the scenes, you could look in node modules and see all the stuff that Sanity is going to put in there. So you can see all the different things that, so here's, it's got I saw React, there's React, some of the things that's, that has Sanity. But what this is going to be is it generates a web application that you can use to configure your documents, define what your documents look like, and create your documents. So for example, if I were to go here, this is my voice CMS project. It's also based off of the blog post. So it's got posts, authors, and categories, and then it's got this thing called response, which is the thing that I'm playing around with. But it generates this UI, which allows me to say, oh, hey, I want to create a new post. And then based on the configuration that I typed in, it's going to go ahead and create fields. It's like, oh, this is a field, that's a title. Maybe it's required. It's type string. It's got, but any of this UI is all based on just configuring JSON in this project. So what happens then behind the scenes is it's going to actually configure. So now, you could conceivably take this and host it on a website. Right now, I've just kind of it running local, which is also a good way to do it if you're just a developer, but you want to have this configuration. But you could take this and host it someplace and put a login in front of it so that you're.
So to be clear, what we now have is it's generated for you a React project, which you can compile and which becomes the
content creator UI, the admin UI.
Yeah. So this becomes basically the designer's workbench.
Yes. So let's take just a quick look. I wanted to show you how easy it was to set this up. So what you've got is a number of different sections, but here the most important section is the schema section. So like here is a blog post, and they already gave it to us. And this is just you're exporting a JSON object saying that the name of this is a post, and it's going to display on the UI as uppercase post. It's a document. Document means it's going to show at the root level. The other option is an object. So an object doesn't show at the root level in the UI, but you can include an object or an array of objects inside of a document, and that's how you get some extensibility. So you can still group things into objects and break things out. So here's the title, here's the slug, here's some different configuration options. And some of these types are like built-in types to Sanity. So slug's a special type, and the type has options. And so in this case, it's saying, go ahead and use the title, the value in the title, and make the max length be 96, and then do whatever processing to generate a slug for this. Here's an author, but it's referencing another type called author. And I think that might even be a built-in type. So you just go through and define what the different fields are. And then this little section at the end says, well, how do you want the UI to look? I want to be able to show the title, the author, and an immediate image on it. And that's all you define for that. Same thing like with a category. Category is a document. It's got a title and a description. There's nothing else really going on there. But then you group those together. Well, one, just by referencing that one of these things is a type of something else, that it just automatically figures out the relationship of how it's going to build the UI for you. And in this case, I'm going to go through and I'm specifying these different types. I just have to import these different JSON files that I've got for configuring different things. And this is where they all get tied together. And when you save it, then it actually compiles and pushes a change out to the web. And now you can update with the new content type. So you've added
to the, so basically the process of you adding something is to create a new
document. So I created this response
and
document,
then including it in that schema. Okay, so take us through the document that you've created here.
Remember the idea that we had in the last one with the content management system is that you could define these different output templates. So in this case, I'm calling it a response. So it has a title, and so you could say like, oh, this is the welcome template or the welcome back template, something that's user friendly to kind of remind you what the purpose of the template is. We talked about this idea of conditions, that you could have a string that you take data from the environment and do conditional logic, and it would pick, basically it would go through every template and then test the condition. If the condition matched, then it would be a candidate, and then it would figure out based on the candidate of all the templates, which ones it's going to show to the user. This data transform is kind of this idea that I'm playing around with, is that you've got all this data in different places in the context, and there's like $ dot user dot data dot this, and it could be really deep. If you had something that could transform stuff that are in disparate places of the environment using some sort of a data transform into an object that just included the stuff that you needed to fill in the template, or even be used as conditions for the different section templates, then you could do that with a data transform.
This explains some of your posts now and Twitter. This now makes sense. So basically you're saying, this is you saying, for example, you create, from the body that's sent in, Jovo creates an input object. You're now saying after that input object and after a bunch of other stuff, how do I now create my own template input object? And that's basically what the data transform is?
Yeah, so the data transform would be something that, like, if this template was selected, it would check to see if there's a data transform. If there is a data transform, it's going to go ahead and process that. And so then the resulting object that's the output of that transform would be the thing that would be used to test the condition will be included to test the condition on this object. This condition is a little bit different. Let's go, like, here's a message that has a speech and text, but that is enclosed in a section. And so I'm also saying a section has a condition and a data transform. So I could have this condition would be actually a data condition to check to see if I've got 0 items, 1 items, or multiple items. And if I wanted to do a data transform that was just for this section, I could do that. If not, it would use the one that was defined for the whole response. So I could do one transform, but what happens is that if this template gets selected, then the data transform is going to happen, and then it's going to check the condition, and then this is like an array of sections that I've got, and then each section would have its own, like I said before, its own condition that would be like a data. It could have anything in the environment, but it would most likely have the values from the data transform to do the conditions. And inside of these messages, so now here is an array of multiple messages, an array of multiple reprompts. And so message and reprompt are really the same. It's got a section that you can do speech and text and separate those if you want. You could just do text if you weren't going to do SSML, or one or the other, and it would fill in the other one based on like speech markdown would just say, take out make it text only, or if you only had text, then so that would be how that would work. But this would be these string values for speech and text would have template replacement, like fields, double curly braces, handlebars type templates, and the values that would be filled in with those values would come from the data transform, or also the environment.
I was going to say just from the data transform or from the environment. I think the data transform is an interesting one because it's almost creating aliases of a sort, and it's a good way to say this long complicated thing, or even this set of long complicated things, I'm just going to reduce it to one very simple thing. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And what's interesting about that is,
I'm warning you, I may have to steal that one from Multi.
Steal it. Go ahead. It's not copyrighted. I'm really liking this idea of data transform, so I want to kind of keep pushing it and see how far I can go with it. But the idea is, as well as that, you've got the text that's going to be spoken or shown on the screen if you're just doing simple, text on a screen. But you might also have an APL document, and there's a data source that's part of the APL document, and it might be in a different structure, even though you have this data that you've said, I'm going to talk about a product. Product has a name and it has a size and a weight and whatever else it's got, and you're going to use that as part of your text to speech response. You might want to use that same information in APL. But there are some constructs in APL where there's templates that already have a set structure that, as long as you set the name, like a title and a subtitle, and use certain values in the data source For that, then it just automatically fills in on the APL. And so you'd want to, even though you've got it in the right format in one case, you might want to use a data transform to then transform that into another format that would fit with what you want, what's going to make sense for you for your APL output.
Yep, no, that makes a great deal of sense.
So just really quick on the UI side of how that looks again, is that I can go ahead and create a response. I've created 2 responses here. Here's a welcome response. And so I give it a name, and here would be like what the condition would be. Here could be either a reference to another document called the data transform, but found a really cool library called JSON-Xform for JSON transform. And what it does is it takes in a JSON object source and a mapping, which is also JSON, and the output then is a JSON output. And so you really could have just a JSON string be this transform, and it would just take whatever the values. The source would always be what's in the environment. So it would be the Jovo object that includes the $ input, the $ request, $ data, $user.data,
yeah.
$session.data. Any of those things would be part of the environment, and those would be that whole object. Since everything hangs off of that Jovo object, we could treat that as a JSON input object, the source, and then a mapping, and then the output would be the object that would then be used for the rest of this stuff.
Now let me ask you, one of the things that, does the data transform language allow for things like, if this field is set, then use this value, otherwise use this value, otherwise, and I ask that because that's one of the things that multivocal I had to deal with in multivocal, was saying,
yeah,
sometimes I'm going to get this from the session storage, but if it's not in the session storage, then I need to get it from this other field. And if it's not there, I need to use this as a default.
Right. No, it's not. Currently the thing that I'm using for the JSON transform is probably not that advanced. Part of the reason why I might have this be a separate data transform object is I could have 2 different types of transforms. One would be the simple transforms, and the other one would be like code-based transforms.
Okay.
And so I could have a well-known object in my code that was the list of transforms by name, and then I could actually execute code and get the response of the transform back, and then use that data. So that's
okay. Now I've got a question about the kind of logic behind how you're setting up responses here. I guess some of this is also tied to what we talked about last week.
Yeah.
Is that this is very response triggered. How do you tie a response to the request, basically? What intent got triggered, or what action the user takes? I mean, I see some of that here in the condition.
Yeah.
Is it more than just what's in the condition, or where does that get set?
Yeah, no. So the idea right now is that everything would be in the condition. So you could have multiple and, like in this case, the input type is something that Jovo abstracts from whatever the request is and says, if this is the initial launching of the skill or chatbot or action, then it's going to give it an input type of launch. So I'm saying if the input type is launch and the user's object is new, is like this is the first time that the user object hasn't been created before, then this would be the condition that would say, hey, if these things in the environment match this condition, then this template qualifies. And then what it's going to do is this listen at the end is going to be, when the response comes back, do I keep the microphone open or not? If we look into this, I'm not 100%, I've really just played around with it. So I'm still tweaking what the UI might look like or how to structure things. But like, here's a section. The idea is that I could have multiple sections because in Jovo, you could have multiple output objects in your response. And if it's a chat bot, then each output would be a different bubble. So if you think of like each section being a different bubble in the response, then
also I imagine some of these sections would be things like might be a section for which APL template to select.
It could be.
Or I could see other sections just besides pure text message
Yeah.
come back. You would be able to set more than one of those.
Yeah, exactly. So in this case, I'm playing with the idea that there could be conditions on sections, because I might have some response that has some sort of like an intro, some like core message, and then the prompt at the end. And then there's the reprompt. Usually if there's a prompt, there's a reprompt. So I could have each of the sections saying, there could be like one of 3 different intros depending on different data values. Or like maybe you're introducing like your product and you're like, there are 0 products. There is 1 product. You have 20 products, So you might have a section that would have different conditions based on the number of items that are in the data, in the array of data. And so then the message would be different based on that. So not only is the template response conditional, but the different sections could be conditional.
Is the message also conditional? Do you have conditions on the messages too?
I don't. And so that's kind of where I stepped it, is that at the section level would be where the conditions would be.
And again, thinking about this compared to multivocal does have each message can have a condition, but there's also this notion of base conditions. So you set something and it applies for all of the following messages until you set something else.
Yeah.
And this groups it slightly different, but it's got the same concept.
Yeah, good. And the idea here with messages being an array is that then now you can specify, like here's, this is the actual response. In this case, it would say welcome. But you could have multiple messages here, and then you could even have part of this be like a weighted condition. But right now, if there were like 10 items, that would randomly pick from these 10 items what the response was going to be. So that's kind of how you would handle variability. It's all part of the welcome response. But you can have variability based on the number of messages or the number of reprompts that you have. So
this all makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And again, and the result of this becomes a JSON file that becomes the configuration for your templates in Jovo.
Exactly. Yeah. Let's see if I can. Does that tell me? It's been a while since I've done this.
Been a while. You've been working on this how many days?
Probably like, I don't know, maybe 10 hours over the weekend. And this was just this is so easy to set up. I set this up, and what I've done here is like an hour worth of work defining these schemas. But you can see here how it's got, here's the raw data for this. It's got, like here's my condition, here's my listen, here's my different array of sections, and they've got an array of messages, and behind the scenes it puts its own data type and keys, but you can so this is how it knows it's a response, this is how it knows it's a section object. But you could very easily take this and use this as is to iterate through and pick templates. And plus there's there's this feature on here where you can publish or you can unpublish, so you can determine like when something goes live, and you can also make duplicate. So I created this one and then I duplicated it and did the welcome back one. So this may not be the best UI for what we're trying to do, but it does auto generate the whole UI for you.
Well, one of the things that I said last week is that you're right, it may not be, but the only way we're going to figure out what works and what doesn't is by trying it out.
Yep.
As this seems to be a hot topic, the general notion of a conversation engine, a CMS, whatever we want to call it. And I've seen some where there are good ideas here, but there are problems. And I don't think we would have realized the problems until we tried them out.
Yeah, and this is like a low cost, kind of easy way to do a play around, see what you can figure out. Like before, I had to listen before off of the message object, because that's the way Jovo actually does it. Because these are real, a message object in Jovo has a speech and a text, and it also has a listen, but it figures out if there's multiple listens in the output, then it picks out whatever the last one is what the response is, so it could turn the microphone off or not. It's got some rules around that, but I thought, oh, it probably makes more sense to expose that out at the outer level, since this is the thing that's going to get responded. Do I want the microphone to still be open when this whole response happens? So just playing around with different ideas. Things may move around. I may not like the data transform thing, or I may really love it. Who knows? So it's just kind of, I could take this JSON here, or the JSON, which would be the list of all the templates, and I could then hard code that into my project that I've got over here, which is the CMS. Because like this is the same thing that I was playing around with. This templates.json would be like, here's the name of it, here's the condition. Oh, I forgot priority. I probably need to put that into the other template. And so I can, play around with these different ideas and I don't even have to necessarily connect this to the CMS, but then I could, right? I could, at the very beginning, I could query all the templates off of the CMS and then iterate through on each turn of the conversation to figure out what the response is going to be.
I think it's very cool.
Thanks.
I think there's, for starters, I'm jealous because, I'm working on, the CMS for multivocal, and, in 10 hours, you were way ahead of where I was at 10 hours. And you're probably way ahead of where I am now, many hours later.
Well, I'm not sure about that, because you've got a lot of stuff that's built in your configuration based with smart fallbacks. Oh, there's nothing like that in this. And, in some ways it's a different approach.
It's a different approach. Well, but again, we're all experimenting on what the possible approaches are.
Yeah.
And I think one of the big differences is that multivocal and the multivocal CMS are all from scratch. It's really building from very basic principles. And you're saying, well, what if I build this on top of Jovo? I've got a really, well thought out, well structured, well tested base. And I'm just going to, put a bunch of lines of code on top of that. And then, I need a CMS for that. So I'll use this well-established, well-functioning base, and I'll build something on that. So very different approaches.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly your approach makes a lot more sense than mine does from a software engineering and reuse approach. You're the smarter one of the two of us.
I don't know. Be kind there, Alan. I think you've got a lot of ideas, and some of these things that I've been doing, I've been inspired by what I saw that you were doing with multivocal. So we're building on shoulders, right?
Well, no, this is definitely true. I mean, a lot of my ideas are inspired by other projects and where they started from outside of voice.
Yeah.
And I think we are just all learning. I highly respect the fact that you are using existing components and building on them. I think that's definitely, from an engineering point of view, that's a very wise thing to do.
Part of it is that I've been on projects before that I've tried to do, and I've got mired down in things like, if I were to have to build a data store and a UI to edit that data store in React, then I would be spending all my time doing that and not really pushing the main idea that I'm wanting to push, which is, what does a voice CMS look like?
Right. No, that's a very fair point. I mean, I am building on this notion that there's a configuration object in multivocal that just leverages Firebase. So I can just say, it's Firebase, I don't care. That's, large chunks of code I know don't need to deal with. So that's a very fair point.
Yeah.
That we are all building off of existing knowledge bases. So this is very exciting. I'm looking forward to seeing where this is going, how this progresses over time.
Yeah. Let's see if I get close enough that I could, I don't know, take some small project and build it and actually have it go live and see what the whole end to end is. I don't know. I'm still feeling like I'm a long ways away from that, but we'll keep pushing it as I have time for.
Yeah. So I look forward to us chatting about this in the future.
Yeah, and looking for feedback from any of you in the community on what ideas that sparked or different ways that you might approach it. I'm open for ideas.
Yep. So as always, find Mark on Twitter, LinkedIn, comments, and
talk with Ellen on office hours. There's a whole nice group of people there, or on Voice Lunch. There's lots of different resources that you can talk through these ideas with.
And of course, we're going to talk about them more another time. Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs. Take care, Ellen.
Take care, Mark. Thanks for sharing this.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.